Welcome back to Nigeria Decides on Plus TV Africa, and we are still discussing the plight of persons with disability in Nigeria, but we're taking it further. We'll be focusing on the participation of persons with disability in politics and in other spheres, of course, because we know that persons with disability are able to do a whole lot. They can do anything normally. Yes, so there's no difference between anybody with disability and anyone else. We're all the same. That is the focus of this conversation. It's all about inclusion, and we're joined by David Anyaele. He's been here before and he's back now, convener Coalition of Disability Organization. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you.
And we also have Adebayo Aliu. He's the National Coach Para Athletics. Thank you so much as well, Adebayo, for joining us.
You're welcome.
For this conversation.
Now, we have a novelty when we are talking about election this time around this year. INEC has said, well, we are introducing special polling booths for persons with disabilities. Are you impressed?
What I understand from them is that they are going to ensure that the polling booths are accessible to people with disabilities, not necessarily special polling booths, because what we've been agitating for is inclusion, participation, equal opportunity. At my own organization, which is also a member, because my organization is a member of the coalition, Center for Citizens with Disabilities, we've been deploying persons with disabilities as election observers in the previous elections. We deployed in Edo, in Ondo, Anambra, Ekiti, and Osun. And in all the local governments, we deploy people with disabilities as observers. That is to say, for them to observe, to understand the level of access and equal voting access for people with disabilities in the election. At Osun, effort we are made to get a Braille ballot paper. But other places, Anambra and all the rest, there was no such. We also discovered that access to polling units is still not there for people with disabilities, because most of the polling units were sited across Gota. Some were sited where you have to climb 2 or 3 steps before you access the polling, the polling unit. So these are some of the issues we catalog. We discovered also that the election materials are not the election process are not put in in posters at the polling unit, where a deaf person can easily read and understand the process, so it can be able to cast his or her vote. So these are some of the issues, and many more, that we've also raised, including issue that has to do.
They are going to provide guides to assist persons with disabilities to be able to participate fully in the process. So if you need a little bit of assistance, but how then do we now define what the guide is supposed to do, and to what extent there's the need for guidance?
Well, INEC, to their own wisdom, if that what they intend to do, they know the level of training they're going to offer to their staff or ad hoc staff to conduct that.
It's 22 days?
Yeah, because one of the key problems we have at polling units is that when people turn out en masse to come and vote, most polling units are always rowdy. It's not always easy to control. Most times the police try to find a way to control them to ensure that they vote. The ad hoc staff, the EO, that is the electoral officer in charge of that place, or the struggle, in between managing the crowd and understanding who is a person with disability that is coming to vote. Do you understand? So these are some of the issues. I believe that by the time they conduct their training to their ad hoc staffs, they will be able to, lead them on their processes to ensure that no one is left behind.
Now, given your position as the convener Coalition of Disability Organization, are you engaging with INEC to determine exactly what should be done, given your findings from previous elections, so that we begin to see a difference? Because I would say this again, this is the first election we will be having after the passage of the disability bill. So how do you intend to ensure that INEC does the right thing this time around?
We've been engaging INEC. Personally, I'm also a member of the steering committee of Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room, which have been engaging INEC for many years on elections in Nigeria. We've had several meetings with INEC chairman. We've also had meetings with all their staffs at the state level. What we are doing as an organization is that we are conducting a mapping of person with disabilities need for this election. in 7 states, namely Abia, Enugu, Gombe, Plateau, Kano, Lagos, and Rivers State. What we are trying to do is to identify persons with disabilities that have PVC, what is their specific electoral need. We intend to catalog it and present it to INEC so that they will be able to target these particular areas where PWDs were identified and be able to understand the kind of provision they will be making for this particular place.
Adebayo, let's quickly also have your thought now. I'm sure you've heard a couple of manifestos from the different presidential candidates. You might have also watched the presidential debate as well and a whole lot of other conversations. But governments day in, day out have been pretty much silent about attending to the needs of persons with disabilities. How do you think, what do you think we should be, which area do you think we should be looking at when we are assessing the next president? Because if they are silent on persons with disability, then it means they don't recognize that over 27 million individuals have some form of disabilities and must be catered for.
To me, I will not say the government is silent as such. Because since the disability bill was just being passed yesterday, it shows a sign that they are not silent.
There's 18 years running.
I know. But what I personally believe is the problem, and is common to every Nigerian. We have the problem of maintenance and implementation. They can bring out bills, law, and everything, but do they follow up with it? Did they monitor it, whether it's being implemented well? Those are the areas whereby the thing did not even get to the masses, the real people, to start feeling most of all this effort. So that's the area I think personally. It's not that government, they are not trying. They are trying, but it's still not enough. And that's why I said it's not that they are silent, but implementation and management have always been the problem of Nigeria.
Okay, I would also like to bring this in because you're talking about implementation of laws. You are the national coach para-athletics in Nigeria. And I wonder how how easy is it for you to get things working in para-athletics, because there are lots of persons with disability who are interested, but how are you able to incorporate them such that they still go ahead to achieve their dreams like you have? I see you're sporty, you have muscles, and you're doing well. So how do you bring more people? Is it easy to even get more people incorporated?
That's why I said implementation. In Nigeria, it's not that they don't know that people with disability are doing sports. Everybody knows that. Even when Nigeria will be praying to God, oh, give us medal in Olympic, but they will say, oh, Paralympic bail us out. So it's not new. Everybody knows. But the implementation, how do we go about this?
Let's also talk about funding now. At the end of the day, you are a sportsman, and there have been reports that government has not paid a lot of attention when it comes to funding in this case, because you have international sporting opportunities and it's been lip service and deaf ears and eyes turned the other way when it comes to funding.
Yeah, we have that problem of funding. It's very, very great. But that problem of funding, I think a lot of people restrict it to government alone. They are supposed to be corporate bodies and private participation. Like in most of our game, if you go to, let me use Ebu table tennis for instance, you will hear something like Mola Diokoya Thomas Open Championship, so many companies like that. But when it comes to para, it is government that will organize. So private participation is not there. So everything is government. But government will always come out and says, because definitely it's true, our sport is more expensive. Because most of our gadgets are imported. It's not made here. And
in Paralympics, how many events did you participate in the last 4 years?
When it comes to the para-athletics we are talking of, we have about 8 departments.
Exactly. And
my department is wheelchair race.
And would you say you've been able to attend at every opportunity games on the international front and local front?
I did no. I've attended few with my athletes, and we've come with laurel and all this, but the challenges are still enormous, because when you talk of when you hear the prices of our equipment and all this, government, government, they will tell you, I'm father of many children, so they will prefer the best alternative. If the para people need something like 50 million, and they look at, okay, when we have people like in the able body that we can spend 5 million, let's go with this one. I think it's more economical. So those are the factors. And when we even come back with our medals, did we even receive the kind of awareness, the welcome, like other people? Paralympic comes up a month after the main Olympic. But when the Olympic is on, it will be on here. Everybody will be monitoring it. Before they comes back to this country, everybody knows when they will arrive. But nobody knows when we, the para-athlete people, when we leave the shore of this country. It's only when we become victorious, they start singing our jingle.
Now,
wow.
David, let's also look at other areas as well. As I can see now, you have artificial limbs.
Yeah.
Do you expect that the Nigerian government today is able to incorporate subsidies in acquiring some of these things? Because for a limb, some of this prosthetic limb costs millions, and it's pretty much quite a sum to afford. What do you expect from the Nigerian government?
The government owes its citizens the responsibility for protection. The government also owes its citizens the right to access to rehabilitation or reintegration. Any government that does not take care of the weak in the society is not a responsive government. Therefore, government owes its citizens the obligation to support them in situations such as disability. The cost of living with disability in Nigeria is so enormous that most times families of people with disabilities cannot be able to take care of it. We also have seen in Nigeria that we have seen over the years where government also wastes resources. Ordinary should ought to be used for such venture. Let me give you an instance. The artificial hand I'm using now, if you look at it very well, it's packing up. This artificial limb cost me 42,000 euro. If we take 42,000 euro by 400 and something naira, you should be able to imagine how much I'm spending in order for me to use a prosthesis that I can use. This prosthesis, I use it to drive, to write, to use my computer, to take care of myself, to live independent. So, if government does not support me, how will I get it? For me to get this, it was a struggle. It was a huge struggle for me to get this one I'm wearing. That was when the exchange rate has not gotten to this, skyrocketed as it is. That time, the exchange rate was still at the range of 170 naira per euro. Now, the exchange rate is about 400 something naira per euro, if I'm not mistaken. So, in situations like this, you want the citizens to take care of the whole burden. So, I keep on saying it. Every Nigerian should have right to rehabilitation when disability occurs. It is the role of the state. When people continue to hold brief for state for their inability to do what they ought to do, that will lead to the corruption we are talking about in this country. There is always provision for budget, even in sports, which he is mentioning. There is always budgetary provision. The question is, to what extent do the state implement that budget for the benefit of people with disabilities? To what extent does the state support people with disabilities to participate? Yes, you've said it. They do Okoya Thomas Championship, other sponsors sponsor it. So if private sector are sponsoring those ones, why not the state sponsor the one people with disabilities are doing? Since the people with disabilities goes to international championship and they win gold medal, why not the state to sponsor them? Out of the 4 million, maybe your federation may need. Why can't the state to say, okay, 4 million, this is what you need. Can't we give you 1? Can't we give you 2? Want to give you 3? So, sir, holding brief for the state for their ineffectiveness or irresponsibility, it's not the best way to go. And that is why I pity people with disabilities that are into sports. I happen to be a president of a federation. I was privileged to see what is going on. The pattern, the measure, the approach they are using to manage disability sports is not sustainable. At the end of the day, it will be killed. And nobody with disability would like to go into sports.
Now, let's take it away from sport because we're rounding off now, Mr. David. Thank you so much. We're taking it away from sport because we know that unemployment is a major issue in Nigeria.
That's correct.
So beyond education, there's also need to extend vocational training to persons with disability in Nigeria. How do we get to the point where everyone who is a person with disability has something they're doing and not necessarily dependent, because we have lots of people out there begging on the streets and want to see less of that? How do we achieve that?
How we achieve it is by thorough implementation of Lagos State Special Purpose Law, which is the Lagos State law that protects people with disabilities, by implementing the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Prohibition Act, which the President has signed. Let me give you an instance in Lagos State. Here in Lagos State, we were able to achieve the Lagos State Special Purpose Law. And what did the law provide? It provided that everybody with disability have access to free education, including vocational training. Even when you pass through it and you are out, government will employ you. Beyond government employing you, if you want to set up your own private business, government will support you for you to set it up. So if someone is ignorant about the provisions of the law, that person will continue to wallow in poverty and lack. And it is the responsibility of the state to identify those with disabilities who have not benefited, those that are along the street, those who are not supposed to benefit from it, and help them to benefit, so that to ensure that the spirit and the letter of that law is implemented to the letter. If Nigerians do not demand accountability on these laws, we'll continue to beg the issue.
Adebayo, your last thoughts now, since we are talking about participation of persons with disabilities in politics as well. Do you expect now that we should see persons with disabilities form members of cabinet, whether it's the executive, legislature, judiciary? The government is saying with this bill, with this law now, 5% of any institution or corporation should be persons with disabilities. But who then now holds the government accountable to say at state level, at federal level, either at the executive, judiciary, or legislative arms, we must have equal representation of these numbers?
That exactly fall under the implementation I mentioned. If everything will be implemented accurately, that there wouldn't be such problem.
Okay. Can you add something to that as we round up? Yeah,
we can't leave the government alone. At Coalition of Disability Organizations at that level, you will know the struggle we made to secure this act. This act is not a executive-sponsored bill.
But I'm saying having the representatives now.
That's what I'm saying is part of the provisions of the act. It's part of the provision of the act. Our responsibility is to monitor implementation.
Okay.
To hold the government accountable and to draw the attention of Nigerians on their role and responsibility to ensure that the act is implemented.
Thank you so much.
We're not going to leave this act to the state alone for them to implement. All of us must read the law, understand the role and responsibility, and begin to hold each and everyone accountable. Nothing more, nothing else. We are going to do it.
Oh, thank you so much, David Anyaele, for joining us. He is the convener, Coalition of Disability Organization. We are happy to have you. And of course, we had Adebayo Aliu, national coach, para-athletics, also sharing his thoughts with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, this is still Nigeria Decides on Plus TV Africa, but we'll take a breather to bring you news update at 8, and then we'll be right back for the concluding part of the show. Stay tuned.